Hello everyone, this is Dr. Sunita Bulla. In this session, we are going to discuss about introduction to Docker. Before going to discuss about Docker, we should know why containers are lightweight. In the last session, we discussed container definition. It is a lightweight package. It contains operating system, software, whatever required to execute your project, application code means project. Along with the application codes, it's all dependencies. All the dependencies, whatever required to execute our application code. This is the container definition. So containers are lightweight because they use a technology. Technology name is called containerization. This containerization allows them to share host operating system kernel directly instead of using full OS. So when you observe this Docker image, Ubuntu Docker image, the size of the Ubuntu Docker image is 28.16 MB. If you want any Ubuntu server, it needed minimum 2 to 10 GB of hard disk to install the Ubuntu operating system. This containers are a very small footprint when compared to the traditional virtual machine. The containers no need any full operating system. So instead of a full operating system, it directly utilize the operating system kernel. So when coming to the uh, Docker is a open source platform. It designed to automate deployment of application inside the lightweight portable containers. Whatever these containers we already discussed, it is a bundle of application code with its dependencies, and finally it ensures the seamless execution across any environment. Whatever container it's not depending on any operating system. If you it execute any environment, if you are using Windows operating system, if you are using Linux operating system, if you are using CentOS operating system, in any operating system, it will execute. In simple words, we can understand the containerization is a concept. Okay, this concept is implemented with the Docker. Docker. When you are using the Docker, we can eliminate work with the mission problem, and we can speed up development and deployment cycles. It provides the better security and better resource management, and it is very useful to the microservices architectures. This figure depicts Docker architecture. The Docker architecture contains three main phases. One is a Docker client, second one is a Docker host, third one is a Docker registry. The Docker client, whatever Docker clients, in the Docker clients, we will run the Docker commands. These are the Docker client. The Docker client is used to run your Docker commands. When you run the Docker commands, those commands are sent to the Docker host. In the Docker host contains three phases. One is a Docker daemon, containers and images. The Docker daemon takes the responsibility of taking the commands from Docker clients. Based on the commands, it creates the Docker images and it runs the Docker images inside the containers. So this is the Docker host. Docker client and Docker host, these two are available in a uh, local machine. Then finally, if you completed your execution, then we can push the whatever Docker images into the Docker registry. So now here we already good at Git and GitHub. So now the client will similar to the Git local. So now in the Git local we will type the all the commands, and we will create local repositories by using the git command. Similarly, here we will type all the commands in the Docker client. We will type all the commands. When you type all the command, that these commands are executed in the Docker host. So now in the Docker host means here it's directly executed on the kernel. Then inside the Docker host, it created the images and containers. And next, finally, if you want to push the Docker image into registry, then we will push the Docker images into the registry. Registry is similar to the GitHub. We uh, in a GitHub we will push the remote whatever project in the form of repository. Here also we will push Docker images to the Docker registry. Now let's deep in Docker client. So this Docker client is used to execute the commands. Docker architecture. First phase is Docker client. In the Docker client, there are different interfaces. First one, Docker CLI. The Docker CLI we will execute by using the command prompt or terminal. Next one, Docker desktop. This Docker desktop is GUI based. Next one, Web GUI tools also there. Example of Web GUI tools are so Portainer and Rancher. These two are the Web GUI tools. Whatever this Docker client is used to run Docker commands. So the Docker client is used to run the Docker commands. There are three types of interfaces are there. Then Docker CLI. We install the Docker CLI with the help of command prompt or terminal. We will execute the Docker command. Or next one, Docker desktop. Docker desktop is a GUI based for a Windows or Mac operating system. Now next one, Web GUI tools also there. These two are the Web GUI tools to execute the Docker commands. Next one, Docker host. Next phase is Docker host. Docker host is like a environment that runs the Docker engine. Whatever environment, if that environment is used to execute Docker engine. This Docker in whatever this Docker host is used to create a Docker images running the container and communication with the client and a registry. So now whatever this Docker host is act as a mediator between your local system to remote repository. So now how Git and GitHub, similarly there are two phases here. One is a Docker client and second one is a Docker registry. Now this Docker host is a mediator and it gives the communication between your local system Docker client to Docker registry, and at the same time inside the Docker host there is a Docker daemon. The Docker daemon takes the entire responsibility to create a Docker images running the Docker images on the container, and communication network related things are maintained by the Docker daemon. And at the same time, the Docker daemon uh, mainly takes the responsibility to create Docker images and containers. Second phase is Docker host. The Docker host is nothing but it runs Docker engine. Now this the Docker host having Docker daemon. It having Docker daemon. The Docker daemon takes the responsibility of images and containers. So whatever this Docker daemon, it create the images. When you run the project, now that project deployed on the container. For example, if you have a React project, we created React project in a VS Code. Now when you run the React project, what happens? Now that React project deployed on the server, and on the server port number 5173, on the top of the server port number it will deploy, and when you type the localhost 5173, then we can see the output. Here also the Docker daemon created the images. When you run the image, that application deployed on the container, whatever that application is deployed on the container, then container is a provide the port number like 8080 like that. In the top of the container we will see the output. The Docker host contains the Docker daemon. The Docker daemon takes the responsibility of creating images, running images, and opening the container, deployment. Everything is taken care by the Docker daemon. Third phase. Third stage of Docker architecture is Docker registry. Thus, Docker registry is a versioning controller repository similar to the GitHub, but in the GitHub we will store the project code, project repositories. In the Docker registry, we will store the Docker images. For example, Docker registry. The Docker registry is to store Docker images. There are two types of Docker registries. One is public Docker registry. Example is Docker Hub. It is a by default public. Similarly, private Docker registry. Examples are Harbor, AWS ECR. So these are the private Docker registry, paid registries. Now see here, what is the relation between these three simple words? In the Docker CLI, we will execute the commands related to the converting application code into the Docker images. Now, whatever commands is sent by the Docker CLI or Docker client. Now Docker host, in the top of the Docker host, we have a Docker daemon. Docker daemon execute the command, created the images. At the same time, it deploy the application, it runs the application in the top of the container. Then next one, Docker registry. Now after completion of creation of Docker images, if you want to store your Docker images, then here we will store Docker images inside the Docker registry. This is the complete architecture and life cycle of the Docker. So now what is the workflow here? The Docker client. The Docker client sends the command to the Docker host. The Docker host contains Docker daemon. The Docker daemon takes the responsibility of the images and container. Then we will push these containers to the Docker registry by the with the help with the help of Docker client by using the commands. So this is the Docker life cycle. Docker build. Docker build is used to create a Docker image. Docker run. Docker run, that images is run on the container. Then Docker push. The whatever Docker push, the Docker push is used to push your Docker image into the registry. These are the basic commands. So now here when you observe the commands, these commands are related to image, container and network. Whatever commands, these commands are divided into three parts. Whatever commands, first one related to Docker image, second one Docker container, third one Docker network and Docker maintenance. So now these commands are whatever entire Docker commands, these Docker commands are related to four categories. First here Docker build. Docker build is a command to create Docker image, and Docker image, if you want to see Docker images, then list of Docker images, we will use the Docker images. And so now these are the commands related to the Docker image. Docker build, Docker image, Docker container. The extension are there. If you want to build the create the Docker image, -t, and we will give the image tags. But these are the basic commands related to the Docker image. And if you want a Docker container related images, I mean commands, Docker run, Docker stop, Docker start, Docker stop, Docker PS. This Docker PS is used to see the list of containers, whatever containers are there. So now these are the commands related to the container. And Docker network. Docker network is nothing but, for example, if you have a front and back end with the two containers, then if you want to provide the communication between the two containers, then we will use this network related commands. Docker run, so this is the example of the Docker container related commands. Now if you want to maintain the Docker logs, Docker inspect, any vulnerabilities are there, we can use the Docker inspect, Docker rm. So now these are the commands, few basic commands related to the Docker maintenance. So all the commands in the Docker, all the commands are related to Docker image, either Docker container and Docker network and Docker maintenance. Finally, summary of the Docker. Now see here, first of all, the Docker architecture contains the Docker client. It is a Docker desktop. Let's assume we are using Windows operating systems. So Docker desktop. So we are this is the Docker client, Docker desktop. Now we will run all the commands related to the Docker client. Now here when you send the Docker commands, now Docker daemon, Docker host, we can call it as a Docker host also. Docker host or Docker daemon. Whatever commands, these commands are executed on the Docker daemon. So first, what Docker daemon will do, now whatever your application, that application is converted into Docker image. First, whatever your application, that application is converted into Docker image. So now here project code, let's assume you have a project code. In the project root directory, we will create the Docker related files. So now in the directory, we will by using the Docker client, we will execute all the commands. Whatever your project code, first of all, it will convert it as a Docker image. Now, first of all, it converted into Docker image. If you want to see the output of that project code, now that project has to be deployed on a server. But here we are not using any server. We are not using any operating system. Here we are using concept of client. When that is the reason with the help of Docker client, we need to run the Docker image. If you want to see the output, that output, first of all, there is a command docker build. Docker build is a command to convert your project code into the Docker image. Then after that, if you want to see the output, now we need to deploy the application. Where we need to deploy the application? Here we will write the command. Command name is docker run. When you type the docker run in the image location, then what happens, whatever your docker image, the docker image immediately deployed on the container. The docker daemon takes the responsibility to create the container. To create the container, on the top of the container the docker image was deployed. Now we can see output. Whatever, here we can see website. End user can see the output of this image in the form of URL. Next, this is the up to the local system. This is up to the local system part. First, after completion of the container, after seeking the output, we will stop the container. The container is nothing but the container will deploy the Docker image. If you want output, if you want to see output, we will start the container. Then when you stop the container, it automatically terminates. Then here what we'll do, if you want to store this docker images, if you want to store this docker image, we will go to the one docker registry. The docker registry name is docker hub. Now in the docker hub, what we'll use, we'll simply store these docker images to the docker hub. Whatever docker images created by the docker daemon, these docker images we will store into the docker hub. So if you want to share your docker images with your friends, simply share the github, docker hub URL to your friends. They will download this docker image. Simply they will run this docker image into the container. So first of all, what is the difference between um, local running and docker running? If you want to run the application into the local, simply we will in the VS code we will run the application. We can see the output on the 5173 port number. But in the container, if you want to see the output, simply run the docker images. The docker images were deployed on the container. The container provides the port number. Then on the top of the container we will see the output. Then you can see the output until the container is in start mode. When you stop the container, the server automatically turn off and we cannot see the output. Then finally, if you want to store these images, then we will push these docker images into the docker hub. This is the complete workflow of docker. If you know this workflow, you are familiar at docker concept. Now these are the terminologies we already discussed: Docker daemon, Docker client, Docker desktop. Daemon is nothing but Docker engine. Docker client is nothing but Docker CLI or Docker desktop. Docker desktop is nothing but a one GUI based Docker client. Docker registry is a Docker hub. Docker images. Docker images will deployed on the container. If you want to use everything, we need one file. File name is Docker file. First of all, before going to do the experiment, first of all we need to install a Docker in our local system. Docker installation. Docker installation and configuration. If you want to install the Docker, first step is create Docker Hub account. For this purpose, go to the internet, type Docker Hub. Website is hub.docker.com. Go to the website hub.docker.com. Click on sign up. If you have already account, then go with the account. If you don't have any account, create a account. Just we can create the account by clicking continue with the Google, continue with the GitHub. But with this is the Docker we are using for a deployment purpose and the Kubernetes orchestration, and many ways we are using this Docker concept as a part of the curriculum. So that is the reason we need username and password to give these credentials whenever required. So that is the reason first of all we need to create a Docker account uh, through the form only. When you are creating Docker account, you should careful do not enter anything related to the work and everything related to the personal. So now when you are enter the details related to the work, then features are limited, but that is the reason create account related to the personal. Now here enter your email address. Now enter these details. Click on sign up. Sign up completed. Now enter details to sign in purpose. This is the Docker Hub account. Before installing Docker into your local system, first of all create Docker Hub account. In the Docker Hub account, whatever details, all the details we should enter in the personal pane only. Next, second one, install Docker desktop. We are not going with the Docker CLI. We are using Docker desktop. When you downloaded the Docker desktop, by default Docker CLI also will download. Docker desktop. So now if you want to install Docker in your local system, first of all we should remember this Docker is compatible, very much compatible with the Linux only. Now if you want to install Docker in your Windows, we need to convert our system into Windows features. We need to install the Windows features in our system. First of all, go to the internet, click on Docker install. When you type the Docker install, it shows the Docker engine. Docker engine is different, Docker desktop is different. Now Docker engine is for the Linux operating systems like Ubuntu, uh, RHEL and CentOS. These are the Linux operating system. The Docker engine is especially for the Linux operating systems like Linux operating system page. If you want to install the Docker in a Linux operating system related things, now just go now, click on your operating system, and we will find the command. Open the terminal and type this command. Copy this command, type this command. It will install the Docker into your Linux operating system. But we want Docker desktop, not an engine. So that is the reason. First of all, go to the enter Docker install. Type Docker desktop for Windows. Now click on first Docker desktop for Windows. Now see here, this is the file. Don't need to download here. Don't download from exe file from here. Now next, if your system requirement, first of all system requirement, let's look at a system requirement. If you want to install Docker, you should use Hyper-V or Windows Linux environment. Both you can use either one or both based on your system. Now here, if you want, we can download a WS2 backend, Hyper-V, and these are the things. Windows. Minimum requirement is your operating system should be Windows 10 or 11. Okay, if you want to use a VSL2, our operating system is a 10 or 11. So, right, first of all, don't download any exe file from this website. What we have to do, first of all, we need to enable W2S environment. So WSL environment, here enable Windows OS. For this purpose, go to the search bar, type turn on Windows features. Go to the turn on Windows features. Turn on Windows features. Next, scroll down. Find Windows subsystem for Linux. So see here, this is the Windows subsystem for Linux. Check this checkbox. Windows subsystem WSL. Windows subsystem for Linux and click on OK. Turn on the Windows feature. Click on Windows subsystem for Linux. Select Windows subsystem for Linux and OK. Then after that, next go to the Docker Hub. This is the Docker Hub. Now here we can find the go to downloads. Okay, here we can find go to the downloads or launch Docker desktop. Click on launch Docker desktop. We are redirecting to the just wait. Click on go to downloads. Okay. Come to the Docker Hub page. This is the Docker Hub. scroll down, click on go to downloads. Now here download for Windows, Docker desktop for Windows. Click on Docker desktop for Windows. Then click on Docker desktop for Windows. We can directly download from here, but better to redirect through the Docker Hub. Now installation is perfect. If you are downloaded directly, some installation issues will come. After signing to the Docker Hub, through the Docker Hub website, redirect to the downloads. Click on Docker Desktop for Windows, x86 and x64. So now download Docker Desktop for Windows. Install Docker Desktop. I taking time. Third step, configuration. For the configuration purpose, after installing Docker, just open Docker Desktop. Now click on sign up. First open Docker Desktop, and after before clicking on sign up, first of all we should log in with the GitHub, sorry, Docker Hub. Log in Docker Hub. First of all, open the browser and log in your Docker Hub account. Open Docker Desktop and click on sign up. Few seconds only left. It's going to complete. The Docker is a very small concept. If you understand the Docker, then we can handle Kubernetes in easy manner. Download complete. Now click on Docker desktop. Just double click on Docker desktop. No need to read anything, just click on next, next, next. This is the Docker desktop. So next, click on OK. The Docker installation taking a little bit of time. So when you are installing the Docker, you should be in a good internet position. Just ask the student, whatever all the students, whenever they have a internet, good internet connection, then only they have to install. Let's show the installation process in the classroom and ask the student download at home or whenever they are in a good internet connection. And installing Docker desktop at the same time Docker CLI also. See here, Docker CLI plugins are also downloading. When you're installing the Docker desktop, we can enjoy the two features. One is the Docker desktop and second one is the Docker CLI. Now installation successful. Click on close. Docker desktop installed successfully. The shortcut also created. Double click on Docker desktop. So now first when you are open very first time, it asking the terms and conditions. Click on accept. Now enter your Docker desktop details. I mean Docker hub details. So whatever details in the Docker hub, enter your Docker hub details. Before entering the details, first of all, you should log into your Docker Hub. First, you log into your Docker Hub account, then automatically it opens. Click on Allows, open Docker Hub. Now see here, this is your Docker desktop with the login. Okay, this is the way we will configure our Docker desktop with a GitHub account. First of all, open the Docker desktop. If you don't want to enter the details, if you don't want to enter the details in the time of opening, then what you have to do? Simply log out, skip the login details, skip your login details when you are entering. Now here it will open the terminal like this. Then click on sign in. Whenever you are required, enter the details. Your Docker desktop will connect to Docker Hub. So now every time when you are working with the uh, local Docker CLI or Docker desktop, if you want to push your images into the Docker Hub, you should log in with your Docker desktop. See, We all are good at Git and GitHub. Similarly here, Docker Desktop and Docker Hub. So in the Docker Desktop is used to create a Docker images, and with the help of Docker images and Docker CLI, we will push Docker images into the Docker Hub. We'll see how to create a Docker images and how to push images into Docker Hub in the next session. Thank you.